The star drifter shudders violently as proximity alarms scream through the bridge. Captain Kaelen Vance grips the controls, his knuckles white, his eyes locked on the distorted sensor readings. A ghost signal is emanating from the quarantine zone. His first officer reports, her voice tight with tension, that it is Sector 9. The signal is a data packet, repeating one word over and over. Sanctuary. This single, unsolicited broadcast from the Forbidden Sector throws the crew into a perilous mystery. By the end of this story, you will discover the terrifying truth behind the galaxy's most forbidden technology and the secret it was built to hide. What awaits them is a derelict research station and a ghost from the past, guarding a power that fractures time itself. What would you risk to uncover a secret the entire universe wants to bury? The word sanctuary echoes through the bridge, a ghostly whisper that seems to cling to the air. Kaelen lets the signal play on a loop, each repetition feeling less like an invitation and more like a plea. Our engineer, Rael, leans over the comms console, her face illuminated by the scrolling data. "That is a core systems military-grade carrier wave," she says, her voice low and grim. "This is not some civilian beacon. It is a top-tier encrypted signal, the kind used for fleet admirals and black site projects. Whatever is down there, it was never meant to be found." The debate ignites instantly. Do we heed the quarantine and run, or answer this impossible call from a graveyard? But the argument is cut short by a shriek of static. A new, coldly automated voice overrides every channel on the ship. Unauthorized entry into Sector 9 will be met with lethal force. The message repeats, a flat and final declaration. In the sudden silence that follows, the choice becomes terrifyingly clear. Turning back means living with the mystery, but pressing forward means breaking a law written in blood. Kaelen's gaze meets each of his crew members in turn. He sees the fear, but beneath it, a spark of the same defiant curiosity that burns in his own chest. "We did not come all this way to run from a recording. Set a course for the signal's origin." The star drifter lurches forward, its hull groaning as it crosses the invisible boundary into the forbidden dark. Crossing that threshold feels like tearing through a veil of black silk. The oppressive static of the warning signal vanishes, replaced by an even deeper silence. And there it is, the research station Acheron hangs before them, a grim specter of twisted metal and shattered viewports, tumbling in a slow, graceless ballet through the void. It is a tomb frozen in a moment of catastrophic failure. No running lights pierce the darkness, no engine glow hints at life. Our science officer stares at a console, its screen casting a sickly green light on her face. She reports no life signs, no power signatures beyond the barest background radiation. But that signal, that single word, sanctuary, is still pouring from the heart of that dead husk. The dissonance is chilling. How can a corpse still call out? Kaelen orders a suited boarding party to prepare, his voice a low command in the heavy quiet. But as the shuttle bay doors begin to cycle open, the star drifter lurches violently. Alarms blare a new, terrifying warning. A localized gravity well has activated directly below them, an invisible fist of physics that has seized the ship. The thrusters scream in protest, burning at maximum power, but it is no use. They are being dragged, helpless, toward the station's gaping and mangled main docking bay. It is not an invitation anymore. It is a trap that was set 500 years ago, and it just sprung. The deck plates groan under their boots, a hollow, metallic complaint in the absolute silence. Their helmet lights are pathetic spears in an ocean of black, illuminating frozen control panels and corridors choked with glittering frost. Every breath is a loud, mechanical rhythm in their ears. Then a terminal flickers, its screen cracked but stubbornly alive. A voice, strained and despairing, rasps from a dusty speaker. Log entry 743. The Chronos displacement drive is operational, but the ethical cost, the voice breaks a static-filled sigh. It is an abomination. The words hang in the frigid air, a confession 5 centuries old. Before anyone can react, the air itself shimmers 10 feet ahead. A humanoid shape coalesces from the gloom, a thing of flickering blue light and distorted shadow. It is semi-corporeal, its form wavering like a heat haze, and it stands directly between them and the corridor leading deeper into the station. It does not speak. It simply watches, a silent, ghostly sentinel guarding a truth deemed too terrible to live. Is this the source of the sanctuary signal, a final plea for absolution from a long-dead scientist? Or is it the station's security system, a phantom born of the very technology that doomed this place? The team is frozen, caught between the echo of a horrifying admission and the silent judgment of a ghost. The flickering blue light resolves into the gaunt, desperate face of a man, his form a glitching echo of the past. You should not have come. The voice is Dr. Eris Thorns, a hollow sound that seems to emanate from the very walls. I am bound to this place, a recording in the stones, a ghost in the machine. His spectral hand gestures toward the station's dark heart. The Chronos Drive was our greatest achievement and our eternal damnation. It does not merely travel through space, it fractures the river of time itself, creating ripples that cascade into tidal waves. The core systems did not quarantine this sector to protect us from an external threat. They sealed it to bury their catastrophic mistake. Before the weight of his words can fully settle, a new sound tears through the station's ancient silence. It is the deep, aggressive roar of high-powered thrusters, a sound that vibrates through the frozen deck plates. On their helmet displays, new contact alerts flash with urgent, hostile signatures. 2 core systems enforcement cruisers have just dropped out of warp, their weapons ports already glowing with deadly energy. They have been followed. The very guardians of the secret have arrived to ensure it stays buried, and they are not here to talk. The sleek black hull of the Judgment materialized from nothing, a silent predator blocking their only escape. Its weapon ports pulsed with a cold, violet light, and a synthesized voice crackled through their comms with absolute authority. Freighter Star Drifter, you are in violation of Galactic Edict 7. Power down and prepare to be boarded for immediate impound. Every second of hesitation now carries the weight of their lives. Surrender means the end of their ship, their freedom, and the truth they just uncovered. But any attempt to run would be a brief, fiery suicide against a vessel 100 times more powerful. Kaelen's mind races, scanning the tactical display for any option, any sliver of space to exploit. There is none. The core systems sent their best, a ship designed not just to enforce the law, but to erase inconvenient questions. In that suspended moment, the ghost of Dr. Thorn seems to whisper in the static. They are not just enforcing a quarantine, they are guarding a tomb, and they will bury you with the rest of the evidence. The cold, final choice hangs in the air, a countdown to oblivion measured in heartbeats. Brace for impact. Kaelen's command is a raw shout over the shrieking of tortured metal. He slams the thrusters to full, aiming the Star Drifter not away from the enemy, but directly into the Acheron's gaping wound. The ship lurches violently, scraping through a jagged hull breach with a sound that sets their teeth on edge. They crash land in a cavernous, corpse-dark hangar bay, the impact throwing everyone against their restraints. For a moment, there is only the groan of settling metal and the frantic hiss of escaping atmosphere. They won't risk firing their main weapons inside the station, Kaelen declares, his voice tight with a gamble he desperately hopes will pay off. They would risk collapsing the entire structure and whatever secret it holds. But his small victory is short-lived. On the external sensors, they watch as the Judgment, unable to follow them inside, begins disgorging its own terrifying answer. Sleek, armored dropships peel away from its hull, descending toward the station's outer docking rings. They are not just sealing the exit, they are sending in a team to clean up the mess. The core systems assault teams are on their way, and they are coming in to finish the job. The Star Drifter is no longer a ship in a trap. It has become a fortress in a tomb, and the enemy is now at the gate. Laser fire ricochets down the corridor, brilliant bolts of red energy scorching the ancient bulkheads. The air fills with the acrid smell of ozone and molten metal. In the chaotic strobe of the firefight, the ghost of Dr. Aris Thorne shimmers back into existence directly before them, his form flickering wildly with each nearby explosion. "They are not here for you," he cries out, his voice a desperate, staticky hiss. "They are here for the drive's core memory crystal. It is sealed in the vault below." His spectral hand gestures frantically downward. That crystal is a ledger of every sin, a record of the temporal coordinates for every single adjustment the core systems ever made to the timeline. Every war averted, every rival silenced, every inconvenient discovery erased before it could even happen. It is the proof of their empire, built on a foundation of rewritten history. The ghost's gaze locks with Kaelen's. His offer is a stark, terrifying bargain. Help me perform a hard day to purge, to erase the crystal completely, and I will show you the way out. There is a hidden conduit, an old maintenance shaft that leads to a secondary communications array with its own small dock. It was my private escape route, never logged in the station's official schematics. A fresh volley of laser fire slams into the wall beside them, showering the team in sparks. The core systems assault teams are getting closer. The choice is no longer about uncovering the truth. It is about whether they will become the instruments of its final, permanent destruction. Do they trust the ghost of the man who doomed this place, and in doing so, wipe away the only physical evidence of the galaxy's greatest crime? Or do they try to save the crystal, and in the attempt guarantee they will be buried with it? Thorne's phantom form begins to fade, his final words echoing as he points toward a seemingly solid wall. The purge terminal is in the primary data core. "Go now, your sanctuary awaits." The corridor ahead detonated in a shower of white-hot sparks as an automated defense turret swiveled toward them. Kaelen shoved rail behind a collapsed support beam, the laser fire chewing the wall where she had just been standing. Thorne's voice was a fractured guide in their comms, a beacon of static and urgency. The core chamber is just ahead through the primary reactor conduit. His directions felt like a lifeline thrown across 5 centuries. They moved in a desperate, low crouch, the groans of the dying station a constant counterpoint to the shouts of the core system's soldiers closing in from behind. Another blast rocked the hallway, and a section of the ceiling gave way, crashing down and momentarily blocking their pursuers. It was the opening they needed. They scrambled forward, their boots slipping on the icy deck, and burst through a pair of scorched, half-melted doors. The sight that greeted them stole the breath from their lungs. They stood in a cavernous, circular chamber, its walls lined with dead consoles and shattered monitor screens, and in the center of it all, suspended in a web of crystalline supports, was the Chronos Drive. It was not a machine as they understood machines. It was a swirling vortex of captured energy, a miniature galaxy of sapphire and violet light that pulsed with a deep, rhythmic thrum they could feel in their bones. This was the heart of the abomination, the source of the power that could fracture time itself. It was terrifying and it was beautiful. Thorne's ghost flickered into existence beside the pulsating core, his form strained and translucent. "The memory crystal is housed in that console," he said, pointing a shimmering hand toward a heavily shielded terminal directly beneath the vortex. "Initiating the purge will trigger a cascade failure in the drive's containment field. We have one chance. The entire station will be torn apart in the temporal backlash." Kaelen looked from the desperate ghost to the impossible device, then back to the doors they had just entered, behind which the sounds of their hunters were growing louder. They had reached the source of the galaxy's greatest secret, only to find their only choice was to become its final destroyers. The air in the core chamber turned to ice. A figure clad in polished black armor stepped through the ruined doorway, his helmeted gaze sweeping the room before locking onto the pulsing heart of the Chronos Drive. The squad leader's voice was a distorted snarl through his vocoder. "The timeline is not yours to alter." He raised his weapon, its emitter glowing with a deadly crimson light. "Move away from the console." Kaelen and his crew were trapped, caught between the ghost of a dead scientist and the living enforcer of a lie. There was no more time for debate, no more room for negotiation. The firefight that erupted was a chaotic storm of light and sound. Laser bolts screamed across the chamber, deflecting off the crystalline supports of the drive in shattering bursts of sparks. Kaelen and the others returned fire from behind the heavy base of the central terminal, their shots forcing the armored soldiers to take cover. In the midst of the chaos, Rael was the calm at the center of the storm. She ducked low, her fingers flying across the shielded console Thorn had indicated. The machine was fighting her, its security protocols a labyrinth of military-grade encryption. But Rael was not just an engineer, she was an artist of systems. She found the ghost's backdoor, a hidden command line Thorn had woven into the code 500 years ago for this exact moment of desperation. A low, building hum began to emanate from the Chronos Drive, the gentle pulse of its light sharpening into a frantic, erratic flicker. On her screen, a single line of text appeared. "Purge sequence initiated." The reaction was immediate and violent. Bolts of raw, sapphire energy arced from the drive's core, earthing themselves against the chamber walls and sealing with thunderous cracks. The very air began to shimmer, a heatless distortion that made the world seem to waver like a mirage. The core systems squad leader roared in fury, his attention torn between his targets and the machine he was sent to protect as it tore itself apart. The foundational lie of the core systems was being systematically erased, and the power required to unwrite history was now running wild. A piercing whine built into a deafening shriek as the memory crystal at the console's heart turned blinding white. The air itself began to vibrate, a physical pressure that threatened to crush them. "We have to go now." Kaelen's shout was barely audible over the roar of the disintegrating drive. Rael gave the console one last frantic tap, committing them to the point of no return. As they turned to flee, the ghost of Aris Thorn looked at them, his form already unraveling at the edges into strands of brilliant light. He offered a final, sorrowful smile. "It is the only way. Now run. The escape shuttle bay is one level down through the maintenance shaft. Follow the red utility markers." His image dissolved completely, not vanishing, but pouring itself into the raging energy of the core, a final act of will to hold the chaos at bay for just a few seconds more. They ran, their boots pounding on the shuddering deck. Behind them, the Chronos Drive tore a hole in reality, a silent, expanding sphere of absolute blackness that consumed light, sound, and matter. It was not an explosion of force, but of negation. They scrambled down a narrow ladder, the rungs slick with ice, as the world above them was systematically unmade. The red markers were there, just as the ghost had promised, a faint, pulsing line leading them through a maze of dripping pipes and shivering conduits. They burst into a small, circular hangar, and there it was, a sleek, compact personnel shuttle, its hull dusty but seemingly intact. Its landing lights flickered on automatically, as if it had been waiting 500 years for this exact moment. As the hatch hissed shut behind them, sealing them in, the entire station gave one final, agonized groan. The tomb of the Acheron and the terrible truth it held was finally collapsing in on itself. But their escape was only the beginning of a new, more profound danger. They were no longer just witnesses to a secret. They were now the last living people who knew it had ever existed, carrying the ghost of that knowledge out into a galaxy that had been built upon its erasure. The deck heaved beneath their feet, a violent lurch that sent them stumbling against the shuddering bulkheads. corridor lights flickered and died, plunging them into near-total darkness, their helmet beams cutting frantic, swinging paths through the choking dust. Every groan of tortured metal was a promise of imminent collapse. Thorn's red utility markers, their pulsating glow now erratic and desperate, were the only guide through the labyrinth of the station's death throes. They burst through a final pressure door, its mechanism screaming in protest, and found themselves in a small, circular hangar. It was pristine, untouched by the decay consuming the rest of the Acheron. And in its center sat a vessel unlike any they had ever seen. It was small, sleek, its hull a seamless curve of dark, iridescent alloy that seemed to drink the light. Our science officer stared, her breath catching in her suit. "That is not a standard shuttle," she gasped, her voice thick with awe and terror. The energy signatured it is a Chronos-equipped scout ship. Thorn's personal escape pod. The implications were staggering. The very scientist who had condemned the drive had built a smaller version for himself, a final, selfish gambit for survival. There was no time to process the hypocrisy. With a deafening roar, the ceiling above the hangar entrance cracked, raining down molten debris. They scrambled up the short ramp, the hatch sealing behind them with a definitive hiss. Kaelen slid into the pilot's chair, his hands finding the unfamiliar controls by instinct born of sheer panic. The engines whined to life with a sound that was less a mechanical process and more a resonant hum that vibrated in their very bones. The scout ship shot forward, clearing the hangar bay just as the entire structure behind them folded in on itself. They did not hear the explosion, they saw it. A silent, brilliant flash of white light that consumed the Acheron, erasing it from existence not with fire and shrapnel, but with a terrifying, absolute purity. For a moment, there was only the void and the echo of what was no longer there. They had escaped the tomb, but they were now adrift in a stolen ship powered by the very abomination they had just destroyed, carrying its last, mobile secret out into an unsuspecting galaxy. The silence that followed was a physical weight, thick and absolute. Kaelen's hands trembled as they hovered over the scout ship's alien console, its surfaces glowing with soft, unfamiliar glyphs. There was no time for caution, no moment to learn the controls. On the tactical display, the judgment was already turning, its weapon ports realigning, a hunter refusing to lose its prey. His fingers found a prominent, pulsing crystal set into the panel, engaging Chronos Drive. His shout was swallowed by the machine's response. The universe did not blur. It fractured. The star-dusted blackness outside the viewport stretched into ribbons of searing magenta and emerald green, the very fabric of space tearing like wet paper. There was no sound, only a gut-wrenching sensation of being pulled in every direction at once. A nauseating lurch that made reality itself feel thin and false. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Reality snapped back with a jarring thud that resonated through the ship's frame. They were no longer in the cold, dead expanse of Sector 9. Before them hung a planet of breathtaking beauty, a swirling marble of deep emerald forests and brilliant azure oceans, its atmosphere streaked with white, lazy clouds. It was a world untouched, vibrant and alive. The wave of relief was instantaneous and overwhelming, and then it was shattered. A proximity alert screeched through the cabin. There, hanging in the void beside them, its black hull stark against the lush world, was the judgment. It had not just tracked them, it had jumped with them, matching their impossible journey through fractured time and space. The core systems ship had not merely followed their path, it had mirrored their new reality, a phantom that had slipped through the same crack in the universe. The sanctuary of this untouched world was an illusion. The tomb of the Acheron was gone, but its ghost had followed them out, and it was closing in for the kill. The jungle world below was a brutal, primal landscape, teeming with life forms that should have been dust for millions of years. Our science officer stared at her console, her face pale in the ghostly light of the alien ship. The readings are impossible. We did not just travel through space, we have slipped backward in time. The drive is critically unstable, bleeding temporal energy like radiation. Her voice dropped to a horrified whisper. We are creating localized reality distortions wherever we go. As if her words had summoned it, the void beside their ship shimmered. A colossal, winged reptile, a creature of leathery skin and a terrifying beak, phased into existence. It was there, a living fossil hanging in the vacuum, its one visible eye a cold, black orb that seemed to stare directly into their souls. Then, in the space of a single heartbeat, it was gone, leaving behind only the distant, untouched jungle. The distortion had not just shown them the past. It had momentarily made it real. They were not just fugitives anymore. They were a contagion, a tear in the fabric of history, and the core system's ship hunting them was now the least of their problems. The voice that crackled over their comms was not the cold, synthesized command from before. It was human, strained with a raw and desperate urgency. This is Commander Valerius of the core system's Temporal Integrity Division. The judgment is not a warship, it is a containment vessel. You must surrender the drive. His words hit them not as a threat, but as a horrified plea. Every uncontrolled jump you make is not just a journey, it is a fracture in the river of time itself. You are creating temporal eddies, ripples that cascade backward and forward. We are not trying to protect a secret. We are trying to prevent a paradox that could unravel the chain of causality, erasing entire worlds from history before they were ever born. The shock of this revelation redefined their entire universe. The core system's soldiers were not just faceless enforcers burying a crime. They were desperate guardians standing at the edge of reality with their fingers in a crumbling dam. The ghost of Aris Thorn had shown them the sin, but Commander Valerius was showing them the terrifying consequence. The core systems had not built an empire on a lie. They had built a cage around a monster, and the Star Drifter's crew had just stolen the monster's only key. Their flight was no longer an act of rebellion. It had become a reckless sprint through a china shop of cosmic proportions, with the very guardians of time begging them to stop before they broke something that could never be fixed. The fabric of reality tore open beside them. It was not a hole, but a wound, a gash of shimmering, impossible colors that pulsed with a sickening rhythm. A silent, irresistible force seized both ships, dragging them toward the maelstrom. Inside the rift, visions flickered like nightmares. They saw a galaxy dominated by the spiked architecture of a long-extinct reptilian empire, its war fleets blotting out entire suns. In the next instant, they glimpsed an Earth, a beautiful blue marble trapped in its own atmosphere, its surface scarred by primitive wars, the stars forever out of reach. These were not possibilities. They were histories that had been, and histories that never were, bleeding into the present. Valerius' voice ripped through the chaos, stripped of all authority and filled with pure terror. The drive's initial activation is causing a chain reaction. The paradox is feeding on itself. We must combine our ship's power to seal this breach, or we all get erased. The offer was not a truce, it was a last desperate act of triage on a dying universe. The core system's guardian and the rogue fugitives were no longer hunter and prey. They were two doctors standing over the same patient, watching it hemorrhage reality itself. To survive, they would have to pour the very energy of the abomination that caused the wound directly into it, a suicidal gamble to cauterize a tear in time. The rift pulsed, and for a terrifying moment, the jungle world below them flickered, as if it were nothing more than a projection on a screen that was about to be turned off. It was a surrender to a greater terror. Kaelen's agreement was a single, terse word over the comms, a temporary truce forged not in trust, but in the shared, gut-wrenching sight of history unraveling before their eyes. Their two ships, predator and prey, just moments before, oriented themselves in the void, turning their prows toward the shimmering, sickly wound in reality. Navigational data streamed between them, a fragile digital handshake. The plan was a desperate one to channel the raw, unstable power of the Chronos Drive, combined with the Judgment's immense conventional engines, into a single, focused beam aimed directly at the heart of the paradox. The energy surge was immediate and violent. The small scout ship shuddered as if it were being torn apart, its hull groaning under stresses it was never meant to bear. Alerts flashed across the console, warning of imminent core containment failure. Across the void, the Judgment fared no better, its own systems screaming under the overload, its polished black armor glowing a dull, angry red. For a long, agonizing moment, it seemed the cure would kill the patient, that their combined effort would simply accelerate the end. Then, with a final, deafening shriek of tortured physics, the rift did not explode. It imploded. The impossible colors collapsed inward, sucking the light and sound from the space around it, vanishing into a single, infinitesimal point that winked out of existence. The silence that followed was profound, an unnerving calm that felt heavier than any noise. The immediate threat was gone, but the sobering truth remained, hanging in the void between their two ships. They had just used the very power that threatened all of existence to save a fragment of it, a paradox in itself that left them all hollowed out and staring into the abyss. The silence left by the rift felt deeper than the void itself, a hollow victory ringing in their ears. Then their scanner chimed, a soft, insistent tone cutting through the heavy quiet. The signal was back, sanctuary, but now it was different, no longer a faint whisper from a dead station. It was a clear, powerful broadcast, a resonant chord echoing from a small, icy moon orbiting the lush jungle world below. Our science officer traced the signal's origin, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "It is not a distress call," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is a homing beacon. The encryption, the carrier Wave-a-Thorn, did not just want us to find the Acheron to destroy the data. He engineered everything so we would survive long enough to follow this. The ghost in the machine had left them one final breadcrumb. With a shared, unspoken resolve, Kaelen plotted a course for the moon. On their sensors, they watched the crippled Judgment, its hull still glowing with heat stress, slowly and cautiously alter its own trajectory to follow. The hunt was over, replaced by a fragile, silent procession toward the source of the mystery that had started it all. What awaited them on that frozen moon was not a plea for salvation, but the reason one had ever been sent. The icy surface of the moon gave way to a massive, recessed door that slid open without a sound, revealing a cavernous hangar of impossible scale. Inside, the air was crisp and sterile, humming with the quiet power of a facility in perfect stasis. Row upon row of crystalline storage units stretched into the distance, each one glowing with a soft, internal blue light. They were not weapons or power cores. They were genetic libraries, vast archives of DNA sequences. Our science officer read the first day to slate they encountered, her voice trembling with awe. "This one is the Viridian Enclave. They were a culture of philosophers and artists erased from the official records over 800 years ago for developing a societal model that challenged core systems authority." Kaelen walked slowly down the central aisle, his gaze sweeping over the countless rows. "He wasn't a monster, he was an archivist," Kaelen murmured, the truth settling upon him with a profound and terrible weight. This was not a weapon to be controlled, it was a memory to be protected. In the center of the vast chamber, a terminal lit up and the flickering but now calm form of Aris Thorn materialized. "This is my final confession and my only hope," the ghost began, his voice clear and devoid of static. "The Chronos Drive was never designed as a tool for alteration. It was built as a telescope, a means to observe the unaltered flow of time, to witness history as it truly happened, not as the core systems rewrote it. We saw the cost of their edits, the beautiful, vibrant civilizations they quietly snipped from existence to maintain their perfect, sterile order. The drive became a weapon only when they realized what we had seen. They could not unsee the truth, so they decided to unmake the witnesses and the tool that made it possible. This place, sanctuary, is the record they could not burn. It is the proof that other ways of being, other paths for intelligence, once flourished in this galaxy. The core systems did not fear the drive's power. They feared the history it revealed. The silence in the hangar was broken by the soft hiss of an airlock cycling open. Commander Valerius stepped onto their ship, his polished black armor gone, his face a roadmap of exhaustion and regret. He looked at the crew of the Star Drifter, his gaze stripped of all authority. The core systems did not create the Chronos Drive, he began, his voice heavy. We found it drifting in the void, a ghost ship from a civilization that is now just dust. A precursor race so advanced they could sculpt time like clay. And they used that power until there was nothing left of them but echoes. He paused, letting the weight of that extinction settle in the room. Our edicts, our quarantines, they were not born from a hunger for control. They were born from a primal, screaming fear. We were children who had found a weapon that could unmake the universe, and our only thought was to hide it away, to prevent our own species from following its creators into oblivion. His admission hung in the air, a confession that redefined 5 centuries of galactic history. The core systems were not malevolent architects of a false timeline. They were terrified librarians guarding a doomsday book, so afraid of its power that they began tearing out pages they deemed too dangerous to read. Their methods were a brutal, unforgivable wrong, he conceded, his eyes meeting Kaelen's. But the fear that drove us, the sheer terror of that power, that was entirely justified. We were not trying to rule the galaxy, we were trying to save it from itself. The air in the ship's cabin was thick with the silence of a verdict waiting to be spoken. Kaelen looked from the weary face of Commander Valerius to the grim, determined expressions of his own crew. The Ark was secure, a frozen museum of lost futures, but the engine that could create more of them was still pulsing softly in their ship's core. We can lock this place away, keep its secrets safe, Valerius said, his voice low and urgent. But the drive is a cancer. Its very existence invites someone someday to try and use it again. We have a chance now, a fleeting moment of stability, to find and deactivate every last component. The core systems failed by trying to control it. We can succeed by letting it go. Rael shook her head, her gaze fixed on the viewport and the stars beyond. Erase it, and we erase the only tool that could ever prove this archive is real. We become the new censors, burying the truth under a different kind of silence. This isn't about hiding history anymore, Kaelen said, his voice cutting through the debate. He looked at each of them in turn, his crew, his family. It's about choosing our future. Do we live in a galaxy where this power is a permanent temptation, a sword of Damocles hanging over every civilization to come? Or do we make the harder choice, the final sacrifice, and break the cycle for good? The choice was no longer theoretical. It was a fork in the river of time itself, and their decision would set the current for all of history to come. Rael's voice was quiet, a stark contrast to the hum of the ship's impossible engine. There might be a way to end this, but it will cost us everything. She explained the plan, her words painting a terrifying picture. The scout ship's Chronos Drive was fundamentally unstable, a flaw they could weaponize. By overloading it in a precise, controlled chain reaction, they could generate a unique energy signature, a dampening wave that would propagate through the very substrate of subspace. It would not be an explosion, but a cancellation, a resonant frequency designed to find and permanently neutralize any other latent drive signatures hidden across the galaxy. The core system's greatest fear would be rendered inert in a single, silent pulse, but the plan had a brutal, physical requirement. To achieve the necessary amplification, the wave had to be generated from within the crushing pressure and immense energy of a stellar corona. The star itself would act as a lens, focusing the pulse to ensure it reached every dark corner of known space. The ship, and whoever was at the helm, would be vaporized in the first microsecond of the reaction. It was not a mission, it was a funeral pyre, a single, fiery sacrifice to cauterize a wound in the universe itself. The silence that followed her explanation was heavier than any star. Who would make that choice, and who would let them? I am going. Kaelen's voice was flat, a statement of absolute fact that cut through the rising tension in the cabin. The crew's protests died in their throats, silenced by the grim finality in his eyes. I brought us into this, I will see it through. There was no room for argument. He turned to his first officer, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was both a farewell and a transfer of trust. The ship, the crew, the truth of this archive, they are yours now. Get them clear. His final command was directed to the comms, to the Judgment and its weary commander. Protect the Star Drifter. Ensure the story of Sector 9 is never buried again. There was a pause, then Valerius' voice, stripped of all pride, echoed back. You have my oath, the promise given. Kaelen turned and walked toward the scout ship alone. The hatch sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing. Inside the small cockpit, the air was cold and still, the hum of the Chronos Drive a waiting heartbeat. He powered up the systems, his hands moving with a calm precision that belied the tremor in his soul. He input the final coordinates, a trajectory that would plunge the vessel directly into the heart of the system's star. This was not a flight path, it was a sacrifice drawn in fire across a star chart. He did not look back at the ship that had been his home or the faces of the family he was leaving behind. There was only the star ahead, a brilliant, waiting inferno, and the absolute certainty that some stories must end so that others can begin. The scout ship tore through the void, a silver needle aimed at the heart of a star. Kaelen's hands were steady on the controls, the roar of the overloading Chronos Drive a rising scream that vibrated through the hull and deep into his bones. He watched the star swell from a brilliant point of light into a churning ocean of incandescent fire, its surface a tempest of plasma waves larger than worlds. Initiate sequence. His voice was a quiet anchor in the storm of noise. He did not hesitate. He pushed the throttle to its limit. The universe did not bend this time. It shattered. There was a flash of blinding, silent white, and then a sensation of immense, crushing pressure. The ship rematerialized deep within the stellar furnace, surrounded not by empty space, but by a seething, liquid gold. For a single, eternal moment, the ship held, its shields glowing with the intensity of a newborn sun. Then the Chronos Drive reached critical mass. It did not explode. It resonated. A wave of pure, neutralizing energy bloomed from the ship's core, a silent, expanding sphere of order that drank the chaos of the star's own fury to fuel its journey. This pulse was not a weapon of destruction, but a cure. It washed through the galaxy at speeds beyond light, a gentle, final sigh that smoothed the frayed edges of reality. In its passing, every lingering temporal distortion, every ghost of an altered past, every unstable ripple in the river of time simply stilled. The silent scream of the paradox was finally, irrevocably silenced. Aboard the Star Drifter, holding position at a safe but agonizing distance, the crew watched the star flare with an impossibly pure white light. It was beautiful, and it was the most terrible thing they had ever seen. The light faded, leaving the star exactly as it was, burning on, utterly unaware of the sacrifice that had just been made within its heart. Kaelen Vance was gone, his final act woven into the fundamental laws of the universe itself. The ghost in the machine was finally at peace, but the memory of the man who silenced it would now burn forever in the hearts of those he saved. The star's surface calmed, its brief, terrible flare of white light fading back into its steady, golden burn. On the bridge of the Star Drifter, the crew stood in a silence that was part grief, part awe. There were no more alarms, no more distortions flickering at the edge of reality. The oppressive hum of the paradox was gone, replaced by the familiar, quiet sounds of their own ship. It was over. Across the calms, a channel remained open to the judgment. Commander Valerius did not speak. None of them did. There were no words adequate for the price that had just been paid or for the fragile truce that now existed in its wake. The first officer finally broke the silence, her voice soft but clear in the stillness. He gave us a chance to learn from the past, not to repeat it. Her words were not just a eulogy for Kaelen, but a vow for all of them. She turned from the viewport, her gaze sweeping over her crew, and then to the tactical display where the core system's ship still hung, a silent guardian. She input a new course into the navigation console, a heading that pointed them away from the grave of a star and the ghost of a sector toward the uncharted black. They were not just leaving a location, they were leaving an era behind. The forbidden technology was gone, its threat extinguished forever, but the truth it had revealed remained, a solemn seed planted in the heart of a galaxy that now had a chance to grow in a different light. The future was unwritten, finally free from the long shadow of Sector 9, and they were sailing into it, carrying the hard-won hope and the enduring weight of history together.